Hi, I'm Jack, and welcome back to Real Opinions. And today I'm going to be reviewing Rogue One, a Star Wars story directed by Gareth Edwards. Two things just before I start off the review. The first being that this is spoiler free. I mean, I'm going to be talking in kind of general terms about like second act, third act, battle, but it's just general terms that, it doesn't really give away anything. It's just stuff that you knew was coming. And also, secondly, I'd like to add that if you get the chance to see it in IMAX, I think I'd recommend it. If not for the fact that it's IMAX, just because you get 5 minutes of Dunkirk beforehand, which I wasn't expecting before going in, and that was really cool just to get that. And it really, I don't know, I think seeing the war battle before going into the film made me more excited for that and more in the mood for that, so I liked that. It's hard to, for me personally, it's hard to review this film just because I'm quite lucky that I didn't review Force Awakens at the time, because I had a lot of difficulty trying to separate my kind of technical opinion of that film and me just going, Star Wars, yay, Star Wars, yeah. And so it's hard for me to separate the two. And for this, I'd definitely say it's the same in that I liked this film. I loved it because of Star Wars. If it wasn't for Star Wars, it's kind of hard because if you took Star Wars out of this, I don't know what film you would have left. But I know that if it was not a Star Wars film, I would not have liked it nearly as much. So Rogue One, in case you don't know, is the kind of prequel to Episode 4, A New Hope. The original Star Wars, and it's the story of the group of rebel spies that get the Death Star plans. When initially hearing that this film was going to be made, I didn't roll my eyes or anything like that, because I quite liked the idea, if anything, because it's not any character that we've already seen just made young, which that's why I'm a bit worried about Han Solo, and it didn't feel like it felt like a logical jump to make this film, and I was a bit worried going in that I was going to feel like it was just a very forced in bit of story in order to make that Star Wars money. However, it felt like it didn't feel like I was watching it going, oh, it's great how they managed to fit this into Star Wars. I just felt like I was legitimately watching more Star Wars. It just felt like I wasn't thinking about how well all the pieces fit together and how well they managed to pull in the lore from different places. I was just excited to see a story that I hadn't seen yet. It felt like, yes, this definitely happened in the universe. It didn't feel like it was an extension. It felt like it was just something that I hadn't seen before. And that I really liked, that aspect of it. I'll talk about the positive first, then get into the negatives, because the positives are what I kind of want to focus on with this review, because I think that any Star Wars fan is going to like this film. Along with that, me saying it kind of fit in perfectly. It didn't even feel like it fit in, it just felt like it naturally belonged. There was more, I felt like there was more Star Wars references in this film than The Force Awakens. I really loved the amount of information in this film. It made me realise how much I do remember from Star Wars, as in they will mention a general or a fighter or a model of vehicle, as into the serial code of a vehicle, and I know it, just instinctively know it, and then love the little references to them, and it doesn't feel like, half the time, it doesn't feel like they're just dropped in for the sake of it. It just feels like it's just real in the world, and it feels like this battle and this ongoing war is a real legitimate thing, as opposed to just bad guys versus good guys, which I really, really loved that aspect. And it really, again, I just said it felt like it belonged in the world. There's 2 or 3 references where I feel they're a bit heavy-handed, in that it's not so much that they're in the way that they are included in the story, but in the way that the kind of film focuses on them. It kind of lingers a bit too long, just so it's like someone saying, did you get it, after a joke. It's not bad, but it's kind of takes away from the fun of you knowing it yourself. But I mean, it's for kids, and it's the more obvious references as well, and I think that's the kind of references that any kid could get, and they'll be like, oh, that's a clever reference, that's good for the kids to start building that. And then obviously if they come back to it at a later age, they're going to realise more and more about this film, which I just think is great. It's kind of hard now to talk about just positives, because every good side of this has a bad side after now. So characters, I don't think I disliked a single character in this in the film. I think they all did fit into their parts really well. I liked the general group, like the Rogue One squad. I liked every moment that we kind of got with them. And I'll leave it at that for the positives for now. And I think that they had a really good dynamic, and it was a believable dynamic as well. Because I mean, when you kind of hear about a squadron film or something like that, you can imagine how everyone falls into the typical stereotypes, because we've had so many war movies and so many adventure movies that we know the roles that everyone has to fall into. I mean, you can just see from the poster, you know, there's the overall leader, there's the comedy part, there's the tank, there's the wise character, and then Jin, who's kind of the rebellious streak out of all of them. And so you can see the tropes right off the bat, but at the same time they just fit well, and they have a balance that I think really helped some of the lesser parts of this film. As for story, I liked how they set up all of the characters, how they got them all to be where they were. This is definitely a film where it gets better as it goes along in a lot of aspects, but mainly in the story. Just because it's all building up to this, the eventual stealing of the plans, of course, and then the whole third act is just this battle that is just I felt like the action was better in this than Force Awakens. It was, I mean, just because it's easy to say that because like people have been saying it is like a war film, like it is focusing on the battle, but at the same time, it was just a really great battle. Like it felt fun, but at the same time, it felt like there were real stakes as well, which was just, yeah, it was just really great to see. And then adding on top of the fact that it's Star Wars with a fun battle. Like, it was just really enjoyable. All of the last third was just complete fun, which was great. And before I go on to the negative stuff as well, the enemy, the kind of big bad, that you'll see him in the trailers, I liked that he wasn't just this is just a random general. There you go. It was definitely like it wasn't just, this is the bad guy, we have to stop him. Each of the characters had their own kind of personal reason for going at him, which I think really just helped for when it came to that third act. It made it much more emotional and much more interesting, as opposed to just bad guys versus good guys. Like, there was, as well as war stakes, there were personal stakes as well, which I really did enjoy with that. Now coming into the worst part, now coming into the bad parts, the story, like I said, it gets better as it goes along, but that means that it starts off a bit weak. It felt like there was a lot more to this film that was cut out. Like, they said that they did reshoots, and I couldn't really tell where they did the reshoots, unless you watch the trailers. You can see there are clear shots and moments that have been taken out or just completely changed, which I find quite interesting, and I'd like to see what exactly they did reshoot, but that'll never come out because it's Disney. So there were definitely, like, stuff that they added in that they felt was missing from the film. But it felt like from the beginning, just a lot was taken out. They really rushed the character introductions on this, and the way that they hastily kind of put together all the pieces into play, really, I think it let down the third act that I said about, because I think that act could have been even better if you were just given the time with these characters to enjoy them even more. And from the very beginning, we jumped to, it felt like 5 different planets, or like back and forth between planets, really quickly right at the beginning, and just to the point where you're just kind of thinking, why am I here, why am I there? It's all jumping around and it doesn't really fit into sense. Like, I know why they're doing it, because they want to be like, here is each individual person in the team and it's building up, but it just feels a bit jumbled at the beginning, like very slapdash. And I think if I came away with like, if I had to say one overall, like the main fault of this film, I just wished that we had more time with the characters and we had more time to develop them, and I wished that the beginning was not as muddled. If it just stuck with one character as a through line and then the characters were introduced on top of that and just given a bit of patience, I think that this could have really improved the film. And I mean, it is 2 hours as it is. It felt like it flew by, to be honest. And I can see why you wouldn't want it to be 2 hours, 45 minutes for a Star Wars film. I mean, like, you're wrong if you think that Star Wars don't want to appeal to families as well. And so I can see why them seeing 2 hours, 45 minutes as a big no-no. And I think that here it was detrimental, genuinely. It was detrimental that they didn't have more of a running time, or they didn't... I don't know, I think the beginning of the story is really where they kind of messed up with some bits. I remembered that I said I liked all the characters. I was wrong. There is Jin's kind of like mentor character, the one, can't go into details because of spoilers. I thought he was very bizarre and just a bit all over the place, like, and they set him up as this kind of important character, and he is important sort of for the first act, but once you get past that, you kind of think, you're kind of left thinking, why was that necessary? Why couldn't you could think of a way to write the plot so that he wasn't needed. He is actually a character from the Clone Wars TV show that I wasn't aware of, and I find that interesting that they are bringing in stuff from the TV shows. And so I know that there were a lot of references to the Clone Wars and even more references to Star Wars Rebels, which is really interesting. The fact that, I mean, you hear that these TV shows are canon in the universe, but you don't really think about them because you just think that they're not going to include the references. But it was interesting that characters that were made for an animated TV show have then made it into the real-life Star Wars films, which that was interesting, but his character wasn't needed in this film. It wasn't worthwhile, and it just added to the confusion of this initial bit where I think you could have streamlined that so much better. However, I will add that I don't think the script is very great. I say that the problem with these characters is that the plot doesn't really have enough time for them. That is true. I think that that's the main reason. However, the time that we do get with the characters, they handle the kind of sadder emotional scenes better. But when it comes to the comedy, I found half of the characters worked for that, and the other half didn't. It just, a lot of the lines where I felt like they were trying to get the kind of quotable jokes that pushed through, I just didn't find them funny. I mean, one thing that I really took away from Force Awakens is that it made me laugh a lot more than I thought it would. It had some really good comedy moments in it. But this one, I didn't kind of walk away with a solid comedy moment. I'm going to screw up his name, I liked Baze Malbus. I believe that was right. He's the wise one that I talked about before. He was just a funny character, and his sidekick, sort of sidekick, was nice. Like, I liked their dynamic. They were just good characters. I wish they could have been written just that bit much better, and then the rest I just thought all could have been written better. The android, K2SO, he's definitely aimed as the comedy character. However, I didn't laugh at any of his jokes. I got the joke that they were aiming for. There's definitely like it's clear right from the get-go what kind of direction all of his jokes are going to go in. They all felt like first draft jokes, basically, is what I'm trying to get across, is that they all felt like someone had written the script, they've got all the character motivations put in there, great, it's all structured out, and I feel like someone was handing this over to say, now we just got to focus on these little moments and really perfect those, and then they just let it slide. And again, I find it strange that, like I said, Force Awakens had really good comedy written, and I feel like this should have worked a bit more on the comedy. While just on the characters, performance-wise, good all the way through. No amazing moments, but I felt like Felicity Jones is a much better main character than Daisy Ridley. I found Daisy Ridley's acting to be quite annoying in Force Awakens, and to be honest, if they'd switched roles, I think I would have preferred that. I really quite liked Felicity Jones, actually. I mean, I've never been amazed by her acting, but she always does a good job every single time, and I think that definitely helped sell the more realistic moments of this film. Second act, when all the characters have come together, then it gets better. Then it's kind of a definite through line for the rest of the film. And then after the kind of third act spectacle, it's not spoilers here, it ends very quickly. There's no time to breathe right after the action stops. It's literally action stops, credits. And it felt like they kind of looked at the time code and were like, oh god, we really got to end this soon. Okay, just stop here. And which comes to my second big problem with the film, which is editing. I thought that this was badly edited. And I feel like the main reason for that is probably just time, because it went really quickly, and it never felt like the story let up at any point. But at the same time, I never felt like I got a proper, real, slow moment with any of the characters, or like it was decent enough in the beginning, and then as it went on, the problems became more apparent. It's because it kind of keeps this kind of frantic style throughout the entire film, which is less obvious in the kind of prologue. It's kind of very jarring for this first act and second act, and it really fits in the third act, which I see why they did that. And then this obviously leads to that kind of quick ending that I talked about. Yeah, and it's a very hard thing to talk about without giving away points of the film where I found the editing to be bad. But it was very, like, sometimes it wasn't focusing on what I thought was important or necessary, while at the same time it wouldn't be giving time to the stuff that was very important. Like, there are very emotional parts towards the latter half of the third act where they're cut with this same frantic energy that the shooting was happening before, and you're just going to think, no, this is the moment where you take time to think, like, this is the emotional part. We have to slow down, we have to process this. But because there's this constant momentum with the film, they want to constantly be moving on to the next thing because we've got to get this plot wrapped up and finished. It just felt like the characters were thrown under the bus for a complete story or a quicker story, and that was a real shame. I think that if they did an extended cut of this, it would be better. It would definitely be better, because the whole first act of them finding this guy and then kind of coming together as a group, that's really just frantic and all over the place, and the editing was just really noticeable there, and it makes it much more confusing than it needs to be, and it could have been such a streamlined story to get to this point where they have to go and steal plans. And again, it's kind of hard because, like I said, I can't talk about stuff, and also the editing does work in certain scenes, action scenes, that works. Any moment where people are talking or just having a moment does not work. It needed a bit of patience at times, and I wish I could have just had that. And like I said, it doesn't feel like it's completely a creative choice. It feels like it's because they had to get this show on the road and they had to keep on moving. And ultimately, I think that this lets down some of the emotional climaxes towards the end of the film, while making the action climaxes quite good still. Yeah, I'm not going to give a numerical value to this film, just because I enjoyed it much more than its technical level, and I feel like I'll know a lot more on my second watch whether or not I do think it's a good film, regardless of the Star Wars love, because for a lot of the time I was just sat there going, oh, it's this thing from Star Wars, it's that thing from Star Wars, this is all Star Wars, yeah, I really love Star Wars, and then I wasn't really like the moments where I was spotting stuff that I didn't like with the filmmaking, I was kind of glossing over that. I mean, I was noticing it, but it wasn't hampering it, because I was just thinking Star Wars, Star Wars, Star Wars. And like I said at the very beginning, if it wasn't for that overall, the fact that it comes in with this Star Wars story and it's bolted in with all these characters and references, I think that without that, I definitely would not have liked this film as much. But with it, it made it genuinely enjoyable, and I think in moments, I think it did bits better than The Force Awakens, and I think that it's worthy. Like, it made me... I don't have any problem with Star Wars side stories now. It was fun, it was good, and I would gladly watch it again. Great, thanks very much for watching. If you want to see other reviews that we have loads on the channel. We have a podcast as well if you want to listen to that. And we're on Twitter, Facebook, all the social media stuff. Great.